A series of one of the greatest stories and one of the worst of all time. I think Series 2 of Doctor Who is a really interesting series to talk about, which is good, because I'm going to talk about it. After the mega hit that was Series 1, this series definitely could have fallen into that difficult second album trope. It had a new lead actor to introduce, which is always a difficult job for any show, and this series really had to be the one that would cement Doctor Who's place on the TV schedules. It had to prove Series 1 wasn't just luck, but instead the beginning of something huge. And although I think one word for this series is messy, it's definitely not as consistent as Series 1. I do think it has some really strong merits. So we're going to dive into it all. The highs, the lows, I'm coming for you Gatiss, and the way it begins to build a world and a brand, and why casual viewers may have a stronger connection to this series than major fans of the show. This is Doctor Who Series 2, the messy second album. I want to take you back to Christmas Day 2005. You've just been given a Nintendo DS and you're feeling like a fucking legend. You're full of turkey, your dad's a little drunk, your nan's fallen asleep or died, depending on how much sherry she's had, and you're about to tune in to the Doctor Who Christmas special. God, I'm feeling a bit nostalgic. One of the weirdest things about looking back at this episode is that I remember everyone I was with on Christmas Day being excited to watch it. Now it feels like Doctor Who Christmas specials are just anxiety-inducing events where you hope it's good and that the family don't hate you for forcing them to sit in silence for an hour while they slowly die of boredom or embarrassment. I think The Christmas Invasion is a great Christmas special, and I'll get onto why in a minute. But first, I think it's easy to forget just how much was riding on this episode. It had to introduce the 10th Doctor, which was most of the viewers' first time having to adjust to a new actor in the role, but it also had to prove that it deserved this Christmas Day slot. In the UK, Christmas Day has always been appointment telly. It's kind of shifted in recent years, which I think is a massive shame, but back in the early 2000s, Christmas Day was the big one. And this episode brought in a peak of 9.8 million viewers, the second highest rating of the evening. A major success and a kind of a huge sign that Doctor Who was here to stay. The BBC had a winner on their hands. As for the episode itself, I think it's really strong. It's fun, campy, but sinister at the same time. I mean, all the people standing on the edge of the buildings is really dark. I kind of wonder if they'd be brave enough to do this now. It's this kind of edginess, if you can excuse the pun, that I miss. It's not a visual you imagine for family tea time viewing, let alone on the most magical day of the year. This episode knows exactly what it needs to be, mixing typical Christmas stuff with that Doctor Who whimsy. I love the killer Santas, the killer Christmas tree, I adore Jackie in this episode. None of it's particularly groundbreaking or subtle, but sod it, it's Christmas. I think Doctor Who always needs to balance itself carefully with seriousness and silliness. Too serious and it becomes bloated, too silly and it becomes space babies. But Christmas Invasion gets the balance perfectly for me. However, most importantly, this episode guides the viewer through change. Once again, Rose is our eyes. The Doctor she and we grew to love is no more, and suddenly this new man is wearing his clothes. She doesn't know if she can trust him, let alone call him the Doctor. And over the hour, he grows on her, and we realise that this is the same show, the same character, and the same hero. The only thing I don't like about this episode is the way David Tennant says this line. It's a fighting hand. I don't know why, but it just kills me. I hate it. It's a fighting hand. Why does he say it like that? Why do I despise it so much? Is it me? Is it me? Does this hurt anyone else? It's a fighting hand. Speaking of Tennant, fighting hand aside, I think Tennant is magical in this role, and the fun he's having just radiates off the screen. I know fans get annoyed with the amount of attention the 10th Doctor gets over other incarnations, but I think that's just part of the show. Sometimes things work for a larger audience, and people just latched onto this era in a way that I don't even think the creative team were expecting. I'll talk more about the 10th Doctor in future series videos because I don't think this is his best season, but I do like where they take this character. I quite enjoy just how human this Doctor can be, and it's evident from the first episode where he actually has Christmas dinner with the Tylers, something Nine never would have done. There's still a darkness and an anger to his character, but it's just different. Nine may shout or argue or be very cutting with his words, while the 10th Doctor's anger is more evident in his actions. He lets his emotions get the better of him. He's very quick to react and incredibly impulsive, and all of this is shown in his very first episode. I think the Christmas Invasion characterises the Doctor almost immediately, something that some other eras have struggled to do. And a lot of this comes from Tennant's performance. He's an incredibly charismatic actor with an energy that just takes over the screen. Your eyes just get drawn to him. He's so effortlessly watchable and charming that it makes sense why so many people fell in love with his character. Definitely children. I think part of the reason this era did so well with the kids demographic has a lot to do with David Tennant's presence on screen. He's very quick, very animated, both in his physicality and speech, that it holds a kid's attention span. Throw in a couple of great monsters and you've got the young ones hooked. Now, one of the main criticisms people have with the 10th Doctor is his romantic traits. It's no overstatement to say that 10 was pretty pretty horny, falling in love and lust with a lot of the characters over his tenure. And I can understand why people don't like this. If you adore the character's more alien characteristics, then this may feel too big of a change for you, and I get that. Personally, I don't have a massive issue with it, definitely not in this series. I think a romantic and flirty Doctor was always going to happen at some point, and I think Tennant was the right performer to give this side of the character. I think they use it too much, definitely in later seasons, but him and Rose works. The chemistry between David and Billie Piper is magical. I think the reason it may feel tiring to fans is because of how many times after this it's happened. What with the Doctor and Rory being pitted against each other, River, Clara, Yaz, I feel like we've squeezed every bit of story of the Doctor and companion having feelings for each other, and it just needs a long rest. It almost began to feel like a gimmick, a trope of the show, where at least for me, it feels natural in Series 2. And it's the show treading new ground, which I'm always a fan of. The first few episodes of Series 2 are fine. New Earth is incredibly camp, but it's a fun romp. It's not a groundbreaking series opener, but I'd argue that's not a bad thing. It's got a lot of monsters and action, and honestly, that's what a lot of Doctor Who is missing now. Say what you want about New Earth, but I can see why as a kid I loved it, and why so many children watched the show at the time. Evil cat nurses, zombies, talking skin, it's nuts, but that's Doctor Who. Same with Tooth and Claw, it promises a werewolf and delivers on that promise. I don't know why there's kung fu monks, but sod it, why not? And this episode is darker than people give it credit for. The Cage Man is terrifying. Honestly, one of the scariest scenes of this era. And although these episodes may not be award-winning drama, they're perfect for the audience that they gained. They fit the feel of this era both in style and a storytelling sense, so the audience feels safe in its company. The style and tone of a show really does play into audiences' expectations and enjoyment. Heaven Sent is a beloved episode, but if it was in this era, it would have been incredibly divisive because it would feel out of place. It's one of the biggest issues with the current seasons. It doesn't feel right. Space Babies doesn't feel like the same show as 73 Yards. But I think these early Series 2 episodes all tonally fit. This creepy cage man is a lot scarier and darker than Chip and Joan Rivers, but it still feels like the same show, the same creative world that we're exploring. And these episodes do a wonderful job at developing Ten and Rose's dynamic. They're both young, or at least they look young, so it has this young naivety to it. They're a little reckless, very jokey. They're running across the universe and finding everything joyous, barely stopping to recognise the danger they're in. And as this series ends in a devastating way, I think it's important we get these light-hearted fun adventures. It's the balance that makes those moments more effective. One day you're having a romp getting separated by a monk, next day you're separated by a wall.
Hey, that's life.
School Reunion, however, has a bit more to talk about. Although Series 1 reintroduced some of the biggest elements of the classic show, mainly with the Daleks, it was done in a very clever way of recontextualising them for the modern audience. As I said before in my latest video, instead of just telling us the Daleks are his greatest foe, be scared of them, they created the Time War, giving new viewers a reason to fear them and a new reason for the Doctor to hate them. Everything else was introduced as core elements that needed little explaining, such as the TARDIS or regeneration. That's just part of the structure of Doctor Who. School Reunion, however, is the first time the show really acknowledges its past, in an episode that, while I still love, I do think it has some of the era's biggest issues. But first, the positives. The way Sarah Jane is reintroduced into the Whoniverse is masterfully done. Sarah Jane Smith is one of, if not the most popular companion of the classic era, travelling with both the third and fourth Doctor. Her bravery, humour and moral compass made her one of the greats, and fans adored her. Bringing her back could have easily been a massive mistake if handled wrong. This was the first time Classic Who and classic fans were really being acknowledged, so if it had been shit, it would have felt like a massive betrayal for those who've been fans of the show for such a long time. But Toby Whithouse, along with Elizabeth Sladen's performance, managed to not just please classic viewers, but also find new fans for the character in 2006. This is because her appearance isn't just treated like a stunt like it might be nowadays. This wasn't a little wink to the camera. Instead, her presence had a massive effect on the plot and the tone of the story. The resolution entirely revolves around her being here, what with her pet dog being blown up, but also all the character work. Her presence really reminds the audience that the Doctor is old, has had a past life that we haven't seen in this new era. It makes him feel more alien, and it's the first time Rose really looks at him this way in the series. It allows us to see our lead in a new light, a man who's so happy to see his old friend, who is almost overwhelmed with nostalgia and yet still has no regrets about leaving. No apologies are made. It also allows us to see a new side of Rose. I know people find her quite annoying in this story, but I think it fits for what we've seen before. She's young, naive, scared of being left behind. The Doctor made her feel important and suddenly she feels ordinary, something she's been so scared of being since travelling in the TARDIS. And for me, this is how you do a returning character. You make it matter not just for those watching at home, but for the actual story that's being told. So I should be saying this episode's perfect, but there's one thing that really holds it back for me on every rewatch. The unnecessary romance. Now, I know I said I don't mind Rose in this story because I think her arsehole behaviour fits for such a young character. However, it annoys me so much that Sarah Jane is at times written like a jilted lover rather than the hurting friend who was let down by someone they care about. When the subtle pain is allowed to shine, it creates some amazing TV. This scene is wonderful in terms of writing and performance. I love it. But I wish it was like this throughout the whole story. I don't think the sudden introduction that Sarah Jane was once head over heels in love with the Doctor is necessary to the plot of the episode or to the character. If anything, it's less interesting. Have Rose still be jealous and allow that jealousy to be out of fear of one day being abandoned, that's fine. But Sarah Jane shouldn't be jealous of Rose. She instead should be longing for days gone by. She should be upset that the Doctor never mentioned her because that's her friend, who she spent some of the best times of her life with. I think the jilted lover angle takes away from the more interesting emotional story that could be told. Also, this bit always annoys me. In Series 1, her treatment of Mickey, although mean, felt natural, it was believable, but this eye roll is stupid. I don't know, it just feels forced and out of character and I don't... Speaking of Rose... God, remember the days when Doctor Who had great character-driven storylines? This series may have its critics, but God, the character work is lovely. Definitely how it builds on what was previously explored in Series 1. The Tylers and Mickey are some of the greatest side characters we've had in the show. They're not just stock characters that are there for reactions, but they feel so real. They have wants and needs and secrets and sadness. And the way they grow and change over the course of these two series just feels effortless. It's not, there's a hell of a lot of work put in it, but a well-written story masks that. It allows an audience to feel safe in its company. In Series 1, we explored Jackie and Pete's relationship in the brilliantly written Father's Day. In 45 minutes, we witness a crumbling marriage, a man who is kind of a bit of a wet wipe become the father that time never allowed him to be. We witness Rose explore the grief that's gone unspoken in her life, and this isn't just grief of a 19-year-old, it's the grief of a child who's finally allowing herself to feel sad and angry and scared. It's perfect, and this story could have ended here and it would have been a lovely addition to the Tyler's arc. However, the show goes one further, diving deeper into these themes of love and loss while moving towards a conclusion that doesn't just feel natural, but incredibly earned. The Cybermen two-parter is incredibly underrated. Obviously, Dalek gets the praise it deserves for bringing back such a classic villain, but Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel do a marvellous job too, keeping many aspects what made them iconic in the first place, while also modernising them to keep with the new era's tone. Are they a bit stompy? Yeah, but that noise getting closer and closer to the house at the end of part 1 is just a brilliant bit of tea time horror, and I love it. Also, making these Cybermen from the parallel world allows you to make changes that won't necessarily rile up die-hard fans, which I think is just a very clever thing to do. However, for me, the genius of these episodes is due to the emotional storylines our characters go through while going up against villains that wish to erase all emotion and feeling. Rose's pain in seeing her dad being alive and successful in this parallel world is really brilliantly done. She's longing for this father figure she never had, and although she knows he isn't really her dad, she's desperate for him to be. Her having to see her parents' marriage still struggling, her not being alive in the world, it's all raw emotion that is given its time to breathe. This story is just incredibly well paced. Mickey getting to see his nan again, Pete losing Jackie, even the Doctor thinking the TARDIS has died, it's all allowed its moment. And no one ever acts out a character for the convenience of plot. They all still feel grounded in what we've previously been told. Mickey staying behind isn't just a plot twist to get people talking, it makes perfect sense. He knows Rose and him are done, she's picked the Doctor, so now he's doing something for him. Also, I love it when a plot feels naturally embedded into the entire series. This episode never makes you think that the parallel world will be important for the final. Instead, it feels like it's important for the character growth, which in my opinion is always the stronger story beat. Okay, enough praise. Let's talk about the crap stuff. Dear God, this is a bad episode. Me and a friend have this running joke that some episodes of Doctor Who are just evil. Episodes where the theme or the story or overall vibe is so backwards, so wrong, that the episode should come with a warning. The Idiot's Lantern is an evil episode. It's horrible, nasty little thing. And I'll talk about the messaging in a bit, we'll get to it. But why are there so many Dutch angles? It's all Dutch. Now I love a Dutch angle as much as the next guy, unless the next guy is Euros Lyn, because he's lost the plot here. There's so many of them. It's barely a Doctor Who episode at this point, but an immersion of what the world looks like during a stroke. It just hurts my eyes. And the messaging, dear God, it's so bad. We spend the episode with the Connollys, a family made up of Tommy the teenager, Rita his mum, and Eddie, his controlling, abusive, evil dad who is most definitely a violent man. We watch him terrify his wife and child, control their lives, threaten them with violence while also pretending that he's a great upstanding gentleman in the community. We see him shout, go bright red with anger, the works. He is an awful bloke. Anyway, 40 minutes and 5,000 Dutch angles later, Rita kicks him out and finally he loses. He lost his home and family and he deserves it. The episode could and should end here. It still wouldn't make it a good episode, but at least it would have some morals. But then, in which may be one of the weirdest endings of the show, Rose tells Tommy, the boy who has lived in fear of his dad his whole life, to go after him, to be pally, to ignore all the years of abuse and terror because he's still your dad at the end of the day. And this is bad enough until she follows it up by suggesting that he, the victim, can save his abusive dad. So we see them walking off chatting and it's meant to be a happy ending. That's insane. You're insane, Gatiss. That's just a dreadful message for a family show. It's a dreadful message for a show in general, but let alone when you know people are watching it with their family. What doesn't help is there isn't much else going for the episode. I quite like The Wire, but that's only because of Maureen Lipman's camp performance. The faceless people are quite a good visual, but that's kind of it. It's not gripping in any way. It's not fun enough to be entertaining, nor is it creepy or scary. It's not trying to say anything interesting about abusive parents other than forgive them, I guess. And maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I don't know how else you can read it. It's so odd. It's even weirder when you realise that we have 2 abusive dad episodes in this season, literally only a few episodes apart. Now, Fear Her at least has its morals in the right place. It's still a weak episode, full of nonsense. Again, not very entertaining at all. You can tell this was the cheap, quick one, but at least it acknowledges how abuse can affect a child and a family. Also, we get this guy who may be in the running of my favourite one-off character. I love him. I hope that Big Finish have or will one day give him a spin-off because he deserves it. And it's in these moments that you can really see the weaknesses of the series. It's a quality drop that just didn't happen in Series 1 and it stands out so much when paired with episodes such as the brilliant Ood two-parter. Also, I think it's interesting that the weakest episodes of the series barely have any interesting character work going for them, which really shows just how important the character was to this era. As soon as those emotional beats are removed, the whole episode feels lacking, with nothing really to latch onto. Also, we begin to see some laziness in the storytelling. Series 1 was never exactly subtle, but it never had anything as forced as the end of Fear Her. I think this may be one of the worst endings leading into a final because it's just stupid. Like, what do you mean there's a storm coming? It feels so tacked on to try and leave the audience with some tension because it was missing throughout the episode. It does feel a little bit like the Doctor's saying, yeah, this one was a bit weak, but next time is a big one. Also, if we're talking about low points of the series, there's one other famous episode we've got to discuss, but I'm not going to slate it in a way you may be expecting. Doctor Who's Love and Monsters has become a legend within the fandom, with many claiming it to be the worst episode of all time. People don't just dislike this episode, they despise it, and it's constantly ranked as a low point of the entire show. Love and Monsters is the first Doctor-Light episode of the new era, focusing on a bunch of completely new characters with our main protagonist popping up at the beginning and the end for a couple of minutes. The episode features Elton, a man who once met the Doctor as a young boy, who joins a group called Linda, a small collective of people who meet up to share stories and theories of the mysterious man with a blue box. Over time, their interest begins to dwindle, and the group become more of a social club, with everyone bringing in food, reading their novels, and singing their little hearts out. Suddenly, they get interrupted by Victor Kennedy, Mr. Garlic Bread himself, who takes over the group and forces them to return to their efforts of tracking down the Doctor. And so far, so good. Like, in its execution it has problems, but as a story idea, I like it. I think it's fun to see how the Doctor's sudden appearance in people's lives can change them. Makes them slightly obsessive, but also brings them together in such a weird way. I also like the techniques used to tell this story. The flashbacks, the voiceover, talking to the camera. It's something different, and although it doesn't completely pay off, I like that it tried. I think the biggest issue early on is tonally it's all over the place. Sometimes it's incredibly slapstick, almost pantomime humour, while other times it's genuinely witty with its dialogue. And I'm not saying these two things can't work together, they just don't in this episode. It never comes together in a way that feels natural or pleasing. And this is probably the episode's biggest fault, it never completely gels. There's some lovely bits, some scenes that I think are brilliant character-driven moments, but that's always how it feels to me. Moments, segments, that never fit as a whole. And then when you throw in the Absorbaloff, okay, fuck it, let's talk about the Absorbaloff and his tiny little pants. For those of you who don't know, the Absorbaloff was created by a 9-year-old kid called William Grantham, who won the Blue Peter competition, Create a Doctor Who Monster. Now, Blue Peter seem to run a lot of these Make Something for Doctor Who competitions because they never seem to learn that kids are idiots. Okay, that's a joke. I think kids getting involved in the art and creativity is brilliant. However, I can promise you now that when I become a parent, I will not be sticking any shit drawings on my fridge. The fridge is a sacred place, and I will not be ruining it with little Molly's drawing of a lorry crushed cat. The design of the Absorbaloff is pretty faithful to the drawing, little pants included. And I'm gonna say it, I think the concept is quite good. A creature that absorbs people and their faces are forever a part of him, that's horrific. That's some proper weird body horror shit, and I'm here for it. I think that could have worked. Also, the kid's original idea was that the creature would be huge, as big as a double-decker bus. You must have been so disappointed. Way to crush your kid's dreams, Russell. But I like the idea, sorry. you just imagine? Like, can you just... Oh, I'll get through it. Hang on. Like, can you just imagine, like, telling your friends at school that you've won the competition, you've created a Doctor Who monster, and it's going to be the size of a double-decker bus, and then you tune in and it's Peter Kay doing this? That's fucking genius. But I like the idea. Doctor Who does the Blob. Amazing. Why not? Obviously they didn't do that, probably for budget reasons. This is another cheap episode after all. But it doesn't mean the idea couldn't have worked. And it still could have. Like, you know, big blob is better than small blob, but small blob is better than no blob. But no blob is better than Peter Kay blob. The issue can really be broken down into two parts. One, the casting of a well-known comedian immediately gives the impression that this is nothing more than a comedy villain. It can be done, comedians can be brilliant actors and play a variety of gritty roles, but that's never been what Peter Kay's known for. But then, they double down with how silly it all is. He's not threatening in any way, his dialogue is corny, the performance is so over the top it's almost parody. It doesn't match with the actual body horror aspects, it feels so messy. It feels like it's been created by a kid. And I think that's unfair to the initial idea that should have been taken, remodelled and reworked for a more overall family audience. I'm not saying that the Azorbalov needed to be necessarily scary, but it needs to match the screams and the horror that the characters are feeling, because otherwise it doesn't work. It can still be comedic, but it can't be pantomime, which I think this falls into occasionally. However, with all that being said, I think people are far too harsh on this episode, because although it has examples of some of the weakest elements of the era, it also has some examples of some of the strongest. The stuff with Jackie is lovely. It's really great to see the character away from Rose and the Doctor, to witness how this massive change in her life has affected her. There's a real sadness to Jackie in this episode, and it's written and performed beautifully. The scene where she tries to come onto Elton before being interrupted and suddenly feels stupid and embarrassed is incredibly real. The obsession people have over the Doctor is another fantastic idea. It's a story that has so many ways to go. And even if you don't like the direction it takes, I still think it has to be praised for delving into something that hadn't been explored before. Also, for a show to take a risk like this early on, remember it's only series 2, I think that's really cool. It's not great, it falls flat on its arse a lot of the time and it doesn't have any restraint. We all know the joke at the end. But I do think there's a charm to this story. It's very 2006 and I mean that as a compliment. Okay, let's talk about the arc. It's just Bad Wolf again, isn't it, really? It's no longer writing, Torchwood is just a phrase that pops up every episode. It's less obvious than Series 1, but it really is just the same thing. And on rewatches, it can kind of get slightly annoying, just because it doesn't add anything. I think the Bad Wolf thing works because 1, it's Series 1, so a simple little Easter egg mystery works for a family show. But 2, the words popping up everywhere does mean something in the end. It's a message that Rose leaves herself. Cool, simple, but effective. Torchwood, however, is just the name of an institute. It being mentioned every episode has no overall purpose. They could have just name-dropped nationwide into each episode and it would have had the same effect as the plot, albeit slightly weirder. I think you can take out all the name drops, just keep Queen Victoria starting it at the end of Tooth and Claw, and it would have had the same effect that it does when it reappears in the final two-parter. Now, it's not something I hate or dislike that much, mainly because it is just nothing. Like, it's not an arc that ruins any enjoyment of the stories, it's nothing that changes any lore or has any repercussions later on, it's just a bit bland. The better arc of the series is the Doctor and Rose's relationship, the dependency on each other and their growing confidence of being invincible. However, as I said before, if you're not a fan of the romantic stuff in Doctor Who, it's fair to say that this series probably isn't one of your favourites. So why is it so beloved by casual viewers? If you looked at a lot of fan rankings, you'd be forgiven for forgetting just how loved this series was, and still is in the minds of casual viewers, many who have since stopped watching the show. This series was a winner in terms of Saturday entertainment, and the reviews from both critics and audiences prove that. Even when you get a few duds, the overall feeling was positive, and I think it's kind of easy to see why. There's a lot of fun, fast-paced adventures. The monsters are, for the most part, great. Yeah, the scribble is shit, but the cat nuns, werewolf, clockwork droids, the Ood, the devil himself make up for it. Throw in the Cybermen and the Daleks and you've pleased a lot of people. As I've already mentioned, the character work is excellent and people really became attached to these characters, yet the action was never sidelined for these moments, still packing the season with many action sequences and suspenseful moments to keep both kids and adults engaged. Also, fans may not like a romantic story, but the general public do. They're kind of obsessed with it. Look at any tea time drama, big sitcom, Sunday Tweed period show, any of the soaps, and there's usually a romantic plot or a will they won't they that gets viewers invested. And as this was the first time Doctor Who had explored this kind of plotline, people lapped it up. Made even better by having two very good looking people as your leads. It may sound a little shallow, but people like what they like. It's kind of how the whole industry works a lot of the time. People like familiarity, and romance is familiar. It doesn't surprise me that Series 2 of Fleabag was even bigger than Series 1. It has a romantic will they won't they at the centre of it. David Tennant and Billie Piper's chemistry was incredibly watchable, and their relationship was incredibly believable. It was dealing with themes such as love, family, loneliness, abandonment, growing old, growing up, and death, all while balancing the whimsy of early Saturday sci-fi. And although this series has issues, I'm calling the video the messy second album because it does have aspects of it, this series really was a triumph, and it does have some of the greatest moments and characters from these early seasons. And of course, it has this ending. This isn't my favourite finale. I think it has its issues, but if there's one thing this era was good at, it was packing an emotional punch when it needed to. So many little things can kind of be forgiven in this era due to how well the character beats were handled and how they connected with an audience. It's partly why I think the latest era has struggled with its endings. People don't just dislike the resolutions, but it's not enough for them to feel latched onto in terms of characterful moments for them to forgive the silliness of naming your kid after a lamppost. Army of Ghosts is paced incredibly well, starting immediately with Rose telling us that this is the story of how she dies, instantly producing a sense of intrigue, suspense and threat. We as the audience now know that this show will change its leads, and we've witnessed many character deaths over the last 2 seasons, so for all we know, this could be true. This could be the end of Rose Tyler. We'll come to learn one day that actually nothing is the end of Rose Tyler, but for now, this stands. Another reason why I think Series 2 is better than some people give it credit for is its ability to wrap up all the storylines that they've been following over the last 2 years. We hear a lot about a 5-year plan or a 2-season arc, but neither have felt as well crafted as these 2 series. Everything feels like it was planned from the beginning. I doubt it was, but in a way that's even more impressive, to craft something that feels so natural. In Series 1 we see Jackie lose Pete, in Series 2 we see Parallel World Pete lose Jackie, and then in the final they reunite. Mickey's bravery is a massive contrast from the first time we meet him in Series 1, but it's not a sudden change. It's been building throughout the whole series, and it feels like we were always heading for this moment. And the fact that all this character work is being done while also dedicating time to both the Cybermen and Daleks shows just how good this creative team were at balancing the show's many different aspects. It's this down-to-earth realism met with the craziness of Doctor Who world that creates an energy for this series, and as an era as a whole that has never quite been achieved again. Rose Tyler's exit is a perfect example of just how emotional character moments were more important to this era than world-changing or complicated arcs. The exit is emotion turned up to 11, subtlety is out the window, but that's fine. Rose was a character that many people adored, a character that was never going to just one day leave the Doctor, so her ending had to be sudden and brutal. And I really like the fact they didn't just kill her off. Trapping her in the parallel world with her family is such a nice ending, really bittersweet, but a clever way of doing a companion exit. I'm all for killing off characters, but I think if they had killed off the first companion of New Who, it would have left quite a bitter taste in viewers' mouths. And there's not much else to say about this ending. Like, you've made it this far through the video, you know what happens, you know it works. And if you don't think it works, please do comment because I'd love to know why. Doctor Who Series 2 is an odd one. It has more lows than Series 1, but it still reaches the heights of the first season as well, delivering amazing episodes such as the U2-parter. I think some of the issues people have with this series actually annoy me more in later ones. Like, the romance element works here, it's an interesting story to tell, we just don't need it so often moving forward. The characters are strong, the monsters for the most part are great, and the iconography is still front and centre. Daleks flying over Canary Wharf is brilliant, and if these shots don't make you smile, you may be dead inside, because this is just fun. And fun is probably the word for the series. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing too experimental, but crammed full of fun creatures, stories and adventures, as long as you ignore the Idiot's Lantern. Next time we'll be looking at Series 3, a series that has some of the highest highs that this era reaches while also being held back by its fear to move forward.